Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 8:30. Welcome to our Tuesday, July 15th meeting of the County Board of Commissioners. And we have an agenda before us. And John, I understand you have an addition.
I have one addition. Which I didn't know, and I haven't heard about it here. We've just found out that we had been awarded a grant for prevention aid for aquatic invasive species, and I should talk about that for a bit.
I'll move to approve the agenda with the addition.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Our next item is citizens to be heard, and we obviously, it looks like we have some citizens here today that must have something on their mind. And we certainly would like to hear from you. If somebody would like to speak, maybe if you could come up to the microphone over here. And are you just here to listen and watch us? I'm assuming you're here for a reason.
My name is Beth Wagner. I'm from the Arbor Park Edition in the city of Moorhead, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning.
Is that microphone working?
Oh, sorry.
The light is on.
Okay.
Maybe you can get real close to it to talk. Oh, it's not working?
Oh.
All right.
But the light is not.
Bear with us 1 minute. We'll see if we can.
It's working, he says.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll just talk louder.
Yeah.
Okay. As I mentioned, I live in the Arbor Park Edition, and a lot has happened since June 3rd when the Board of Commissioners approved support for Churches United to build in Clay County. We didn't learn about it until in the paper on the 8th, and then many of us, including myself, didn't learn about it till later when people were coming door to door to bring about awareness of the proposed development. Since this has happened, our residents in our neighborhood, Pineview and Arbor Park, have been subject to ridicule for voicing our concerns for safety as well as other aspects. We've been subject to bullying tactics and labeled with derogatory terms such as NIMBY through social media as well as the newspaper, as evidenced as my own name being called a NIMBY in the paper yesterday. And I take offense to that, in that I know my intentions. I know that I'm a Christian and I care for my neighbors as I do for my own family. So I take great offense to that. And I do help the homeless, and I do offer my time, and I've helped the homeless in other communities as well. Please do not label me. Residents have also been informed that real estate agents have already been discouraging prospective buyers from looking in our neighborhood because of the Churches United proposed development. This is a map of our neighborhood, and it shows our neighborhood developments as well as the business district, and over here with Cashwise, and this is the proposed development for Churches United. I can take this map around the Fargo-Moorhead area, and I've talked to numerous people who have no investment in these properties. They have no ties to this community, and they too agree that this is not an appropriate site for what is proposed by Churches United. I spoke with a gentleman who lives in Moorhead, and I shared with him our situation, and he said he was actually for the homeless development. And he asked a little bit more about what I was, about, and I had my daughter with me, and I said, well, it's going to be right next to our neighborhood with small children. And he shared with me that he grew up in a good Catholic home and got mixed up with the wrong people, wrong place at wrong time, ended up in a homeless shelter. And he shared with me most of those guys, and he said verbatim, most of those guys are not going to make it out of there, and they're a detriment to society. And he looked down at my daughter, and he looked back up at me, and he said, you do not want them in your neighborhood. Now that speaks volumes to me. That gentleman signed our petition. I guess I have a couple questions as far as on June 3rd, when it was proposed, I was led to believe that it was going to be housing somewhere in Clay County. The site was not specific. In looking at the minutes, Ms. Jean Alexander, Executive Director of Churches United for the Homeless, was present to inform the board of CUFH's plans to build 41 units of permanent supportive housing on a parcel in Moorhead. On a parcel in Moorhead. I guess my question to you is, what was done to, because this is a controversial build, what was done, what was asked, what will this be near? How will it affect the neighborhood that it will be placed in? Was due diligence done? I guess at this point what we're told is to write letters of concern to Tamara Wilson with regard to our concerns and our opposition to the grant money going to Churches United. And I'm asking what else can be done to help Churches United understand that this is not the appropriate site for their build. We agree there is a need. We want to help. I am willing to help, be on a committee to help them find a more appropriate site. I respectfully request that the Clay County Board rescind your support of Resolution 2014-32. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Beth, and I'll comment a little bit to your question. And I've spoken with you on the phone, I believe, a couple of times. And when it came before us on June 3rd, obviously any time, there were two separate issues for us here. One was what you talked about for the need in our county for this, and I think you even recognize there's a need in our county for this, whether it's for children who are homeless and as well as our veterans. And that isn't just hearsay. We get that from our veteran service officer here in Clay County, that he has a real concern with that with some veterans. So in this process and through the presentation that was given to us, our board that day supported the concept of need for a facility. Also within that document, in the 3 pages of the document, it's Churches United's application. But in there, the county had a 3-page deal where they filled out. And in there it states, no way does the county put money into this, nor do we support the site location. It's not our job to do it. And I applaud all of you. I happen to agree with your arguments. When you there's sometimes that projects are needed, but they just don't fit a certain area. I remember when our diversion project was originally talked about for the Fargo-Moorhead area, they wanted to put it through Minnesota. It wasn't the right place to put it, and we changed it. Huh?
You backed it.
I backed a diversion, and you just wait your turn. Wait your turn. So in that process, we got it moved with my vote to get it to move. I see what the city council did last night. I read this morning what they did last night, and I agree 100% with their position. And I believe this board should do the same thing in terms of telling the Minnesota Housing Authority that that is not the appropriate place to have this facility. And so all I need to do is I need to have 2 more people of the 4 of us sitting up here, and we'll do that. I had talked to you, Beth, and I told you on the phone that I intended to write my own letter to them.
And I appreciate that.
To explain my concerns, because I do share. And it goes into it goes into other issues here when I start hearing about some of the development that isn't finished yet. And what happens then if that does become stale? We've had too many areas within our cities where developments have failed for one reason or another. And then it falls on all of the rest of the taxpayers of the city to make up for that infrastructure that was put in that is not being paid for because the homes, lands aren't being constructed on. Mm-hmm. It's a vicious cycle, but it's an important one. So I really liked, and of course I just read what was in this morning's paper. That was my first inkling of what transpired last night. And I know one of the council members mentioned something about working with Churches United to maybe make a land swap or something. I think that's moving in the right direction. I don't think the city council has come up and said this isn't needed.
Correct.
And you're not going to get our county board to say this isn't needed. But I think what we can do is unitedly send a message to the housing authority that this choice is wrong. And Commissioner Wayland, when we asked the question, have you got a site for this based on what you were talking about? They specifically told us no, they're not ready to do that. So in our mind, we weren't dealing with the site-specific resolution. We were dealing with the concept.
Can I ask, at that point then, if they did not have a site that they could divulge, why was it not tabled till a later time when they could divulge the site?
Because for one thing, we didn't think it's our position to determine. We don't have jurisdiction within the city anyway. Now, what we would have done, had they said, yes, we have a site-specific place, we then would have said, have you gone to that local government entity? Because we don't supersede the city of Moorhead on their construction and permits. That's not our job to do it.
But just bringing them in the loop would
Yes.
have been...
But had we known, they were on for the next week to get it, and there was some misinformation when they said that we approved the site, because we never, it's clearly in our application, we never approved the site.
And they were simply here to ask for approval of applying for the grant with the state of Minnesota. And that's what we approved. We weren't approving any facility, any location. All we approved was the need that there's funding available with the state of Minnesota, and we thought it appropriate that we agreed to have the application submitted for that funding. But it never did have anything to do with us approving the facility or any location.
However, knowing it was in the city of Moorhead, and after them getting their approval to submit the grant, they did not go to city council or manager. They went to city staff and started working on their building plans, and then bought private property, which then again left out the city and all us constituents. We did not know. We have not been afforded the opportunity to be proactive in any of this. We were forced to be reactive. We are in need of your help to work collaboratively with us, again, to help them understand that this is not the right site. And we are willing to help them find the right site.
John?
What would you suggest would be, you're suggesting it shouldn't be in Moorhead? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying
You
it
have to
should-
have services for 41 units apartment. You have to have grocery store. You have to have...
Absolutely. And in the location that they've proposed, there are no services available. There isn't job services, there isn't social services, there isn't daycare, there isn't any of the services that they need, which, by the way, are services that are recommended, not required by Churches United. And another enabling feature of this site is that there's CVS liquors, Cashwise liquors, Walmart liquors, VFW, and the Legion, all within 2 blocks of this site. Some of these residents are going to have addictions and troubles already. And I'm not saying all of them, because I am not a name caller and I do not categorize people. A lot of these people are in need, and yes, there's going to be families with children, but there will be single adults, as indicated by the documents, 17 to 19 single individual units. It's not going to be just families with children. Why not find a place downtown or in another area of Moorhead if all insist that it be on the Moorhead side, on the Minnesota side? Let's find a good place where those services are readily available to them to help them succeed, to really help them succeed and become gainfully employed, contributing members of society. I would want that. I would want that. I would not want to be in an apartment where that's all it is until they build more, which they plan to build an entire complex, which again is going to affect the value of our homes as well. I don't own anything but our home, which we've made a home, and we've been there for 8.5 years. That's all we own, and we've put our heart and soul into it. And to be able to not be able to sell it or have it be worth nothing, how can a city and a county stand by and let that happen to a neighborhood? I don't understand. I don't.
I think that's a bit of an overreaction. You're not going to have a zero value in your property.
I did not say zero.
You said it would be worth nothing, and I don't think that's
Okay,
very fair.
the value of our home will be greatly diminished.
We don't know that.
I do. Again, we already have realtors deterring people from purchasing deterring prospective buyers from purchasing in our neighborhood. When at the Trinity meeting, when another of our neighbors got up and talked about his home and how it would affect the property values, he asked, when then should I sell my home? And one of the panel members said, I can tell you when, 3 years after the development is up and running. What if we need to sell our house a year after or 2 years after? And I'm sorry, there's many more people that want to speak. I'd like to let others speak as well.
Okay. Anybody else would like to speak?
Hello, my name is Chad Hansen. I'm also a resident of Arbor Park. And last night I spoke to City Council as well, and I think that was probably more of an emotional approach. Beth gave us that today. And I'm kind of looking more at a pragmatic approach. So probably one of the first discussion points that we're going to probably have to agree to disagree on is that Clay County needs a facility like this. I think it would be more accurate to say that the region needs facilities like this, and you'll get no argument from me. Now, Jane Alexander is going to go where the money is. And when you have, at this point, do you know what the difference is between Minnesota and North Dakota? Well, around here it's about 150 feet, right? That's the width, I mean, that's all that separates the two communities. So when you build this campus with Cadillac services, hey, we're going to provide you housing, daycare assistance, food, medical, and you have this discrepancy in the services provided across the river like we have, naturally you're going to draw these people. If I needed those services and I lived in Fargo, I'm not staying. Okay, by the same token, there's a tipping point here. There's something interesting that's happening because we also have people who live right along the river on the Minnesota side who've been bought out of their homes, all up and down in your county, right? Lots of them. Okay. Has anybody done the data on where these people, first off, they're taking Minnesota taxpayer dollars and getting bought out of their home, that's fine, and they're using those resources to move and buy real estate on the North Dakota side. Take a look at where these people are buying their homes. So here's what we're doing ultimately, is we're swapping residents right now. The people that are homeowners that have been bought out are buying real estate on the North Dakota side. And the people that are seeking services that are unemployed or underemployed are moving over to Clay County. So you kind of see how we're trading residents. These people aren't paying taxes. The developers that own the property are paying minimal property taxes as well. A third of all the parcels in Moorhead are non-taxed. They're either owned by the city or they're owned by nonprofits. So do you see how we have this disparity? So when it comes to providing services for these people, we really need to look at it. It's a challenge for us because, of course, North Dakota has their rules, Minnesota has their rules. But look what that does in a border community like this. When you have a difference between these two. So just because we can access state funds, you know, 5, 6, whatever $million, doesn't mean that we should for this purpose. That's my concern. I live in this neighborhood. I don't want North Moorhead to become a dump. I don't want Moorhead, for that matter, to become a dumping ground or a neighborhood for people that just can't be economically viable. And that's kind of what's happening. And it's happening kind of right under our noses. This is your guys' job to keep an eye on these things, not me. I get up, I go to work, I deliver mail, I come home. That's my job. This is your job. So do your job. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Morning.
Good morning.
I'm Lynn Stoltenow. I am a 7-year resident of Arbor Park. And I just want to say that I had a brother that lived homeless. I have a son that has lived homeless. I've worked with the sheltering churches in Fargo-Moorhead. I have volunteered at Churches United. I would welcome permanent supported housing in Moorhead, but I also understand that their service population, even in permanent supported housing, is not a stable population. They are in permanent supported housing because they need a lot of services and a lot of support, and that's a huge help for them because to have an address enables them to access services, and that's important. However, because of the nature of permanent supported housing, not because it is rental housing, there is limits to the amount of rules and regulations that they can impose on the residents and guidelines or whatever you want to call it. So the fact being, this will be, by its very nature, an unstable population, and placing it in a pretty small and stable neighborhood with its own set of vulnerabilities, retired people. There are a number of disabled people living in our neighborhood, families with small children with 2 working parents that feel vulnerable as well. So I would just encourage you to pursue the avenue of supporting Churches United to find a more suitable location for this project, and I thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you. Sure, come on up.
Hello, my name is Ryan Zimmerman. I also live in the Arbor Park development. I also have, tremendous concerns about my kids, their safety, my property value, all of these things that all of my neighbors also have. I'd like to just maybe shed a little bit of light. I feel like I wasn't totally informed or kept up to date or in the loop. So if any of my information may be off, forgive me. But the perception that I kind of get from this is we have a Fargo entity, basically of Roars Construction. Sandra Roars is on Churches United Board of Directors. I believe that they were the ones that donated $250,000 to help them purchase this specific property. Roars Construction is, all of their businesses are in Fargo. Now, I don't know if Roars Construction gets, if they build this facility for them, totally pro bono and for free, or if they're helping them get this pushed through in the state of Minnesota, and they get the contract to build it. Do they make 15, 20%? Well, that's like $1.3 million. So that $250,000 that kicked in initially, they're going to get that back and then some. And then in the end, who ends up dealing and having to pay for all the social services to supply all these people that have these needs? It's Clay County and the city of Moorhead. So I'd also like to ask you to, on our benefit, to help us write a letter that, you do not approve of this site in Moorhead. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this?
Mitzi Peterson is my name, and we live in Pineview Addition. We are a senior citizen community, and we have very vulnerable adults, and we have younger persons also who are handicapped, who legally are allowed in our community under the HOPA, which is a federal program. We have concerns as far as safety, which has been poo-pooed in the paper, but we have people who are vulnerable enough where it is extremely valid that they have those concerns. Due to our age and the vulnerability that we have and the size of our community, I don't know that we can handle a large population of homeless within our area. I think that if Churches United is going to continue on this site, or if they're allowed to start and then they put in additions and additions, they will force us out because we just cannot handle the pressure of that many people who put us more at risk. As far as the economics of it, other people have spoken about that. But I don't think in Moorhead there are that many communities who are elderly people who live in their own home. We do not require service, a main kitchen, this type of thing. And we have residents who are 100 years plus. We have younger residents also who are vulnerable. But I just don't believe this is the proper location next to people who are so vulnerable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, Grant.
Well, I've been unhappy with this process ever since we made this decision. This whole thing could have been avoided if both HRA and Churches United would have been more forthcoming with information that they had at the time they were here making their presentation. And given that, I'm going to move that we rescind our support for that grant application until such a time that an adequate or a better site is selected by the Churches United for this facility. So,
all right, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second? We have a motion on the table. Is there a second? I will second the motion. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Well, we better take a roll call. Vicki, please take the roll.
yes?
Everett,
No.
Gross,
No.
Campbell.
Yes. So we're sitting here deadlocked. We have our other commissioners not present today, so what we can do is, the motion does fail for not passing. What we can do is look at seeing when we can have a vote from our fifth commissioner on this, and move forward that way. Do you want to come up to the mic?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Al Gordon, I'm a candidate for District 4 County Commission. I was attended the meeting last night, and I would have brought this up, but Commissioner Whalen moved the motion forward. I wonder, no, Mr. Chairman, you alluded to this when you first spoke, that what you read in the paper, but is everybody on this board aware that Moorhead, the city of Moorhead, at their council meeting last night, took a decisive action to move forward, write a letter in non-support of this location? Now, we're talking about the city of Moorhead took a decisive action to move forward, write a letter of non-support to Churches United and to the granting agency. I just want to make sure that everybody on this board is aware of that, because I did not, I mean, again, Mr. Chairman, you brought that up. that you were aware of it, but I didn't hear that in the conversation this morning.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And the minute I saw it, and of course I was not at that meeting, but the minute that I did read that it was full support by the city, I found it odd that Clay County would not back and support what the full unanimous vote of the city council within the city that had concerns with that site location, that we need to be there with them.
Absolutely so, sir. And last night at that meeting, there was not one of these people that poo-pooed this agenda as far as moving forward to do something for the homeless. I've talked to people in this area that have donated 40 pair of mittens and boots and everything else to churches, as you've walked around and talked to these people. I'm not taking anything away from you because I know you've been out there talking to them. But the only thing I did not hear again is that the city of Moorhead unanimously voted a letter of non-support to this particular issue in this thing. Now, here's the thing is I was at your meeting, and, as I told all these people, when churches came in, they kind of ran this agenda through as being a non-specific place, because I heard it. They said that they did not have a location. But last night in the meeting, they said that grant was a specific site grant. Now, this board voted on it to approve the application of the grant without a site, because you approved to go ahead and just apply for the grant, but you did not have a site for that, because they sit there and said there was no site. However, it appears that was a site-specific grant. So after the fact, they put the site in when they applied for it. So that's all.
And you can spin that whatever way you want. The fact of the matter is that when Commissioner Whalen asked about if they had a site-specific location, they told us no. From that point on.
Let me make a correction, though. They didn't say no.
Yeah, they said they weren't ready to go public with
because
it.
Because it wasn't, they're still negotiating.
Yeah, so they were still negotiating. They didn't want to go public with it. You got to understand the context of which they were here for us through our department was to support the need. That's what we did, was support the need, not the location. And I've talked to many of you on the phone. You've called and talked to me, and I think 8 out of 10 of you agree that there is a need. I don't think you deny that, and we don't either. But that's all we did as a county board, was said yes to the Minnesota Housing Authority. There is a need for this type of facility in Clay County. Now the decision on how it went about, and after the fact filling in this address, which we knew nothing about, that goes to Commissioner's comments where he was a little bit concerned as to how it was handled even before us. So, but we have a motion that did not fail here, and the only thing I can see us doing now is waiting until we have a 5th member here and see if that changes. But I will, on my behalf, and being a commissioner who I represent your district, I do intend to send a letter. I do intend to send a letter of concern with this site, and I'm going to share the feelings of the entire city council in regards to this. So that letter will be drafted, and again, it's got nothing to do with the need, because I fully support the fact that we have children. When we have children in this county who are homeless, we need to help them. And when we have veterans, and people again say, well, where are you getting this information about veterans being homeless in Clay County? We're getting it from our veteran service officer here in Clay County, who works directly with them. So it is an issue, and we owe it to veterans who come back here and are struggling to get them back on the right track by having some affordable housing for them. This isn't a shelter. This is a place where they'll live. So, but we can't, at this point, we can't do any more on this today. But you've seen what action we tried to do here today, and thank you all for coming, and we'll continue to work on this. I think with Beth, where was Beth sitting? Beth, I think you really offered up some of the best advice that can be given, and that is to get people to work together to come up. And I got the message from the city council. They also want to do that. This isn't to shut down this project. It's to put it where it belongs. Okay, so, and I'll continue to work with them on that as well.
You know, I just want to add too, Tim, and it just seems to me that Churches United, in the interest of being a good neighbor, should want to find a location that's acceptable to everybody that, that the facility would be surrounded by. Otherwise, the chances of it being successful, are considerably diminished. So that's, I think they should, relook at this whole situation too and see if another, location they could find would be acceptable. So
I want to just mention one last thing that in talking with after all this happened, I happened to be in Brian Berg's office, our county administrator, with Commissioner Wayland, and we had some questions for Jane Alexander, and so we asked the question, well, what would happen with this proposal if the grant did not go through? And her reply was that they were going to continue on with the purchase of the land and move forward with the project. So I wonder where they are with their funding sources, and if they have other funding sources, do they need the help of the state? So it's exactly what she said, was that they were going to move forward with or without the grant application. So, but I know that's obviously this is political. There's no question about it. But sometimes it's I'll leave it at that. You know how we all stand up here. So, thank you for coming. Yes, yeah. Why don't you go to the mic, and then we really have some other agenda items. But why don't you come up to the mic, Beth?
I did just want to say, given that information, certainly they may go ahead and build and get donations from other entities, aside from the grant. Given that there is such strong concern, and the city and some of the board agrees, I'm just looking for, how can we stay in contact and work collaboratively? How can we be in communication with Churches United, and again, help them understand that we want to help them find a more appropriate location. Please help us get those ideas, help us collaborate and network and try and figure this out.
Okay, Beth, maybe I can suggest this, and I know it's not an agenda item, but and I'm not suggesting you fill the halls of Clay County later today again, but at 5 o'clock today, we are meeting jointly, our board, with the Morehead City Council. And we do have an agenda full of items already, but we have 15 minutes towards the end of that reserved to talk about this. And I think this is a significant enough issue based on their actions and us that we should start that dialogue to partner together and to work with all of you. The one area there that we talked about were the senior citizen area. My wife and I are very interested in moving over there. Because it's a nice place, and at some point we want to downsize. And I'm not saying that I don't support Churches United because I might move over there. It's got nothing to do with it.
Sure.
But it's just an attractive place to be, and we want it to stay attractive.
Yeah.
But we're going to do everything that we can.
What venue is that meeting going to be at? Are we able to attend? It's
right here. It's going to be in this room at 5 o'clock. But again, it's going to be a little bit different run than this. So you can certainly come and listen, but I don't know that there will be the ability for citizen input, I guess is what I can tell you.
Okay.
But, all right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so with that, we'll this issue, I'm sure will be around. So thank you for coming. That took up too much time.
I move we pay the bills.
Okay, we have a motion to pay the bills. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Oh. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, I guess we did have one other citizens to be heard here that wanted to speak here. So, Dwayne, was it you that wanted to speak?
Do you have time for it, or should I go back?
We have very little time. If you can do it very shortly, yes.
Okay. Good morning. Dwayne Erickson is my name, and I want to thank you, Frank, and the rest of you commissioners on how you pursued and handled the Agassiz Recreational Trail. Your administrator and your attorney did a great job. Special emphasis on what she prepared on a resolution. Item 2, if I may. There's a bridge, or a Texas crossing that's going to be taken out in a project that came to the watershed. It's a mile east and a quarter-mile north of Hewlin, and the projected cost that I heard was $500,000. And your permit was approved, but I voted no for 2 reasons. One of them is the Houston Engineering has designed, and there's some retention possibilities. So my thoughts were, if we were after retention, there's a plan in place. If the county and the township had $500,000, we should sit down and try and spend that money together and put a retention site in. So if any questions, call.
Well, I guess, I think with our delay today on where we are, I would like to get some feedback from our engineer, and we could certainly talk about this again next week if you want to. Is that okay?
Appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, and Dave, maybe you can provide us with more details on this project and go from there. Thank you. Okay, so minutes, did we approve the minutes yet?
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carried. And I apologize to our legislators who are here. We're running behind, and also to those candidates for the watershed district who are here to and I think admirably to want to serve in a capacity as a water board supervisor. So, and that is actually our next agenda item. And we received, it's time to renew 2 positions, and we actually had received interest from 3. And one of them is Mark Anderson. Is Mark Anderson here? Mark? Okay. And I think maybe what we need to have another chair up here if we have all 3 of them here, Brian. If you would like to come up, Mark. Mark is here, and then also Jerry Van Amberg is here. And finally, we had Gerald Zimmerman. Gerald? Okay. So typically what in this process, what we like to do is maybe allow you to give a brief statement as to why you have interest in it. And I know a couple of you had put that in your written request to be considered. But maybe just spend a minute or two. Nothing too long here. And then after that, we have a list of questions that we like to ask each of you, and we'll give the same question to all 3 of you with an opportunity to reply. So who wants to start? Okay.
Okay. I've
Mark?
Been a lifelong farmer in Clay County, and done a lot of work with the watershed board over the years, and so I was run. I think that can be an asset to what they're doing now, and it just seems very interesting and something I'd enjoy.
Okay. Jerry.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
My wife served on the watershed board for a number of years. I don't remember how many years it's been, but it's been quite a while. And it fits my professional interest and backgrounds quite well. I feel like there are a lot of things that we are doing now in the watershed. It's kind of an exciting time because we're seeing a lot of things happen. I'm a member of the Moorhead, City of Moorhead, of course, as a citizen, and we do not represent, though, as a board member. We don't represent any particular area within the watershed. We're supposed to represent the entire watershed for whatever is best for that area. And we've had some, I think, difficulties in the past of trying to be a member of the basin on some degree, and I hope that's something that's on the way to being settled. We've recently undertaken a consultant to help us look at some of these questions in our watershed, and that is, I think, there's some things that we're putting into place right now that's really going to help. So I enjoy the work. I guess I'm retired. I have the time. I feel like I've got the expertise in the area, and I have the interest, certainly. So that's the reason I'm here.
All right. Thank you for coming, Jerry.
I'm
Gerald.
lifelong, well, not quite a lifelong farmer, but I've been farming here since '76. Working with the Watershed Board on controlled drainage and tiling. We do our own tiling on our farm. And we're working with NDSU and University of Minnesota on the project. John is familiar with some of the stuff we've been doing. And of course, water is always an issue with farmers.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so we have 4 questions. Big, tough test. Big, tough test here.
I was told there would be no test.
And so I think we're going to start with the first question with Gerald. We'll just go this way, and then the next one will go that way, and then you'll get one to go. So everybody can go first once here. So the first question is, what experience would you bring to the Board of Managers of the Buffalo Red River Watershed Board?
Experience, well, I have not that electrical engineering has a lot to do with water, but you'd be amazed sometimes. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering, and I worked for Pratt & Whitney Aircraft for 7 years, from 1969 through '76, when I returned here to start farming. The last 4 years since we started tiling our farm, I've been involved with the Watershed Board on a SARS project. That's a grant from the USDA, and as I said, the University of NDSU and University of Minnesota are all involved in this.
Jerry?
Well, by profession, I'm a biologist, so I bring that particular, I think, bent to the position. I'm a grassland ecologist. Therefore, I have a great interest in natural resources, and I think that's something that plays a big role in what we do. I also serve on the Board of Water and Soil Resources in Minnesota, so that helps bring some information as well, I think. Beyond that, the interest, I've served on the Watershed Board for some time, so I've seen the development of projects and understand how that takes place, and the problems it brings, and the challenges that we have. So that's what I would bring to it.
All right, thank you.
Mark? I have a degree in economics from North Dakota State, Ag Economics. And I'm very good at working with people. I've been on the Barnesville School Board, church boards. I've been on the Holy Cross Township Board for 20, 30 years. And I think one advantage sometimes I know how to ask the right questions, think out of the box a little bit. I've had a tendency to foresee problems before they get there, and basically just working with people. Everybody's got a good thought, just figuring out which ones are the right, which way is good, and which way might not work so good. So.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Why do you want to be a watershed manager, Jerry Van Emberg?
That's a tough one. After last night, it's a real tough one. And after what I see your face this morning too, I want to be a manager because I think I can help. I think I have the background, and I think I have some of the experience to help solve some of the problems that we have. And water is a big problem. It has, particularly since 1993, since we've been in a wet cycle, we've seen all kinds of problems. But flooding has been a recurring problem. That's the reason the watershed district was formed, was because of flooding. It's not the only reason that it exists today, because there are other things. But we are trying to do something about the flooding, and that means we have to look at projects. We have to look at projects in order to store water in this valley for some period of time, and that's a real challenge to get done. And I think I have a good understanding of that, and I want to see that happen. I want to see the valley and the citizens, both on the farm and in the cities, protected from flooding. And at the same time, I want to see our natural resources protected as well. And I think the two can go hand in hand. They are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Well, I talked to, I call him Itsy Bitsy Ellison the other day, and he said they had a meeting up at Lake of the Woods and went ice fishing. So that was one of the reasons I thought this was a great job to have, so I could go ice fishing. I too agree. The flooding problem is not a Fargo problem, a Breckenridge problem, a Comps. It's a basin-wide problem, and I think that's the way it has to be addressed. And there's many opportunities out there to hold water back and create also places that for hunting, fishing, for all kinds of good things for everybody. So, and I think that's one of the reasons I'd like to be a watershed manager.
Okay. Joe.
One of the things that we're doing currently on our farm is sub-irrigation. And I don't think that there's anyone else pretty much in the valley who has approached water quite the way I have. We started this in 2010, and one of the problems, interestingly enough, is that I don't have enough water sometimes to do what I need to do. Retention and those kinds of things could solve some of those problems. I'm a pretty good problem solver, and I approach things sometimes very differently. And I think that I could contribute to the watershed board along those lines.
Okay, Mark, we'll go with you first this time, and this question is, what is your philosophy on managing drainage?
Oh, managing drainage. I'm glad you used the word managing instead of controlling water, because I don't think we can control it. We have it. Managing is the right word. The one thing that, at least in our area, that has helped is that there are less farmers, and sometimes the bigger the farmers, the more consensus you can get. Before, there was always the guy on the top of the hill, the water ran downhill, and the guy on the bottom of the hill, he'd dike it up, and the guy in the middle got stuck. Well, now they own some land in the top, the bottom, the middle. So now you can come up with a system that everybody gets some advantage, or everybody, and I think that's the way we have to look at the whole basin, is kind of like that. But
so everybody gets some advantage, or everybody
gets a little bit of disadvantage, yeah, absolutely. But nobody gets this full, And I think that's the way you have to look at managing water, but the problem is getting everybody together, because there's still there's still winners and losers a lot of times, and we have to figure out how to make the losers less losers and maybe the winners a little less on the winning side. But that's what I think of managing waters is you have to, it has to be, I hate to use control, you have to, everybody's got to be on the same page and hopefully make it work a little bit for everybody. And there's going to be occasions, where, when you get, what was last year, you get 10 inches of rain in one night, I don't care what you do. You can't be done, It's just something that's the way it is. So.
It's a headache.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We'll go to Gerald.
Well, I agree with that statement, but there's also some things on the horizon that are going to be probably different from the past. We have, with tiling, the easy tiling is where you have natural outfalls, okay, and with tiling away from a major drainage ditch, you end up having to put in a lift pump, a lift station. Most township ditches were never designed to carry water volumes that could be put into them. So there's going to be issues, there's going to be more management that has to go into a lot of this stuff, things that haven't been addressed in the past. Too much water, you can't do anything about. You can't make a ditch system handle 10 inches of water all at once. Maintaining the current system that we have is another problem in an economical manner. You can't satisfy everybody all the time. There just is no way. Somebody's going to be unhappy some of the time.
All right. Jerry.
What was it? How did you state the question?
What is your philosophy?
My philosophy
On managing drainage?
Well,
Almighty philosopher you are.
my philosophy, I guess, is, I think we have to try and manage the water and drainage, to the benefit of the most people, and how we can do that. There are impacts on agriculture, there are impacts on people who live in town. And I think we have to look at that and see what we can do to negate the problems as much as possible. It means, I think, one thing, that we have to have rules. And that's something that the watershed districts up and down the valley are now looking at. Rules about tiling, for instance. And I think our watershed district has talked about this. I think that they'll be on board with that in proposing some of these rules. But I also think, we can't just turn the water loose. We've got to have places to hold water and hold it for some time. And that's the big struggle that we have, as far as I'm concerned, is finding enough of those areas where we can retain water for a period of days to protect people downstream. And while a lot of people think that that's to protect Fargo, Moorhead, or other cities right on the main stem, most of those sites that we have developed have provided greater benefits to the area right around them, right below them, than they have anywhere else. That's the greatest benefit. And I think we need to be able to sell that idea to people where there are places that can be used for retention. We need to be using them. There aren't very many. That's, people think you put water anywhere, but you got to have the right site in order to do it. You got to have several things to make that happen. And one of the big ones is a willing landowner when it comes right down to the end, and that's the problem we face. And I think we have to work with that. So I guess my philosophy is do as much as we can, as well as we can, working with people, and get them to accept it.
Okay. All right, the last question we have, and Gerald, I think we'll go with you first this time. If you had experience with watershed boards in the past, how would that affect your service as a watershed manager, positively or negatively?
I believe that my experience in the past would affect my decisions positively. The reality is you got to be trying to be as fair as you can, to everybody involved, and that's really what it comes down to. If everybody walks away and maybe they might not feel that they're happy with the decision, but if they were treated fairly, that relieves a lot of the pain. Probably the same as what you guys do.
All right. Mark?
I've always had a positive working relationship with the Buffalo watershed, even when it didn't totally go my way or anything. So I think it would be positive. These boards, sometimes if you got 51% of the people kept happy, boy, that was a good day. But part of the problem is getting these projects with many landlords and many different opinions, and I think that's where I would be good at, is that I can hopefully build consensus and make it work. So I think it would be very positive from my past to the present.
Okay. Jerry?
Well, I sure hope it's positive. From my point of view, I think that what we have done in our district thus far has been very good, and I feel good about it. That's not to say there's not a whole lot more to do. So the short answer is yes. I think it would be very positive.
Right, well, that concludes the list of questions that we have, unless individual commissioners have any other questions they'd like to ask. I think for information, I think what we're going to do is we're going to gather all this information, and we will meet and make the appointments. Our plan is to make the appointments next week. Is that correct? Yeah, I think so. We'll go over it, and next week we'll make the appointments. So I think Grant had his hand up first, and then John.
I wanted to hear each of your perspective on the FM diversion project and what you think about that. So, because the watershed board is an important part of that. So,
would you like me to start?
Sure.
Well, I farm right out of Comstock, so you can kind of imagine that I'm not a big fan of it. I really believe, though, that Fargo needs and deserves adequate flood protection. I kind of think they went for the Taj Mahal approach, but that's they have every right to go. We live in America. They have every right to go for whatever approach they want, but also the people south of town have every right to fight a little bit for our churches, our cemeteries, our communities, our farms, our land. I personally, it's going to end up in court, and somebody's going to decide, and then we'll go from there. And that's kind of my. I do think the Diversion Authority lost a lot of credibility with this Oxbow Ring Dike thing coming down the way it did. How that's going to affect things could be with Minnesota, and it just, I think they lost a lot of credibility there. So that's my take on it.
Well, the watershed district is right in the middle in this, all right, between a rock and a hard spot, because we do have people in our watershed district that are very much impacted by the staging area. Again, I am totally in favor of the diversion. It's needed, and people in Moorhead think that they are protected. And they are protected much better than we have ever been, but we are not protected to the level that we need for this community. I'm sure of that in my own mind. We have to work, again, in our district to try and help those people and support those people that are going to be impacted by this project. And again, I think it's by trying to get retention. The more retention we can get, the less impact that staging area is going to have. What's going to happen? I think the next big thing in this whole process is when we hear from the Minnesota Department of Resources. That's where it lies right now. And as soon as they get their study done, their impact study done, I think that's going to tell us what's going to happen. But project's needed. There's no doubt. We have to have protection in Fargo-Moorhead. It's an economic reality that's the case. There are problems that I don't know how we're going to solve yet. I think we've got to work on them.
I think that retention is probably the key to the diversion project. And I think that retention areas could possibly be, existing farmland. When you add tile drainage to that equation, holding water on a piece of land for a while in the spring doesn't hurt anything. And if you add tile into that equation, you're probably going to be just as well off as you were any other time. And it'd be a whole lot cheaper than spending $2 billion on a ditch. I guess the fact that Fargo and Moorhead has decided that they're going to buy out the houses, in the low-lying areas is a very positive thing. The reality is probably they never should have been there in the first place. So I guess that's it.
All right. John.
I just want to thank all three of you for being willing to do it. Everybody knows that being on a watershed is not a very popular position to be in. You have to make some really tough decisions. So I commend all three of you for being willing to put your name up for that. And we will confer this week and make a decision next Tuesday. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for coming, all three of you. And
thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Yep.
Mark,
thanks.
I keep a little humor in that.
All right, and we're pleased to be welcomed by our local legislatures. It's Ben and Kent and Paul were certainly sorry we had to keep you waiting here, but we had citizens with some issues, and we need to take care of those. So good morning and welcome. And normally at this time it's an opportunity to hear from you on how things are going in St. Paul, how things went, and the good things that came out of it, for particularly what's of interest to Clay County and our citizens. I think we'd certainly like to hear that from you, and then we might have some follow-up questions as well. And so Kent, as a senator, do you want to start this off?
I can start, sure. Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting us here today. And I feel very good about the things that have been accomplished over the last 2 years. The big budget year 2 years ago that we passed, the additional county aid as well as other local government aids has gone a long way towards putting a cap on those property tax increases we've been experiencing over the last decade before that. And I think it's important to note that for the first time in 12 years, we saw property taxes actually go down statewide, and it was going up on average about $330 million a year prior to that, so significant increases. And that $330 million wasn't falling evenly across the state. It was hitting the rural areas disproportionately hard. So to get a handle on those property tax increases, I think, was critical, and to reestablish that partnership with our local units of government, the counties in particular, which I think has been lost over the previous decade, where I felt that a lot of the state's problems were being solved on the backs of the counties and the cities and the school districts and the colleges, all of whom were experiencing cuts and then had to make up for those cuts through property tax increases. So, and the colleges through tuition increases. That's another thing we were getting a handle on as well. So reestablishing the partnership, I think, was a critical component. I'm hoping that we can continue what we've begun there and to develop a stronger relationship between the state and the local units of government as we move forward. Also, I think it's important to note that we did put the state on sound financial grounds moving forward as well. We are now looking at a surplus situation, and hopefully we're in a good position moving forward, so we're not going to continually be faced with deficit after deficit after deficit, which we faced in the past. And that's in large part due to the fact that the problems really weren't being solved in those previous 10 years. A lot of the problems were, as I've already said, being sent down to the local units of government, counties, and so on. And also, the problems were being sent off into the future, using one-time money, for instance, to fix a deficit problem for ongoing funding that is just going to, arise again as a problem in the next budget cycle, which it constantly did. So we're getting out of that cycle, which gives us the ability to make long-term decisions and give us a longer view of things because we're not constantly in crisis mode anymore. So I think that's a good thing. This last year, as I said, we experienced a surplus, and with that surplus, we did provide more tax relief. We also provided more funding for long-term care for those on waivered services, and that would be seniors in their homes and people with disabilities in group homes, and I think that was important, a 5% increase for them. We did a 5% increase for nursing homes the year before. So long-term care is finally starting to see some increased investments, which have been critically important as well. They've been falling way behind. And these people who are working there have not seen pay increases, in many cases, for over 6 years. So it's been long overdue. And I think as far as the last year, again, the biggest thing that was done, of course, was the bonding bill. And we were able to get $12 million for flood mitigation, which enables us to finish up the flood projects here in Moorhead. Oakport was not able to get finished with the funding that was provided. But we were able to provide other funding for Ada, for instance, and other flood mitigation projects in the Red River Valley. I think it's important to note that we were trying to get a bigger bonding bill, and the reason that it ended up being less than what we had hoped for is because the size of the bonding bill was smaller than what I was hoping for. I think it's important to note that in Minnesota, we have one of the lowest, as far as the ratio of debt towards our budget, it's one of the lowest in the nation. We're very frugal when it comes to our bonding bills, and many economists believe that we're overly frugal, that we should actually be investing more in our infrastructure. That includes flood mitigation projects, and that's going to strengthen our economy moving forward, and I agree with that. And I do think that we needed to put more into flood mitigation. But as I'm sure you're all aware, we need more than just a majority to get that bonding bill passed. You need a supermajority, and there was a minority who did want to, have the smaller bonding bill, and that limited our ability in areas like flood mitigation, for instance. But we came out pretty good considering the overall size of the bonding bill, and so I feel very positive about the direction we're moving in. As I said, we're kind of moving in the right direction now. I think we can make some long-term decisions that will be for the benefit of our economy in the long run. So thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah. Paul, we'll go the senior route here.
Thank you very much, Chair Campbell, members of the commission. Thanks for the invite. And Senator Eakin, I think, laid out a lot of what happened, but I do think what was important, probably more than anything, was trying to actually get a budget in line where we didn't just solve the budget for this 2 years, but actually into the future. A lot of times what we've done is, by our Constitution, we have to balance the budget. So we might do one-time funding, we might do shifts, we might borrow from schools. But then when you come back in the next 2 years, regardless of what the economy is doing, you always are in deficit. So I think probably the most important thing, especially for counties and local units of governments and schools and that that you should have a certain amount of predictability now, where it's not going to be these cuts in the middle of the year from county program aid and so forth. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And just a couple other things on property taxes. And as the Senator mentioned, statewide property taxes did go down, but as you all know, farmers saw a pretty substantial increase, and that's almost entirely due to the fact that property values statewide on farmland went up about 26%, and about that in this area too, so you're seeing an increase. We did do some things there. We certainly didn't solve all the problems, but we addressed some of it, is that we enhanced the current agricultural market value homestead credit. So it'll provide agricultural land $200 to $300 of property tax relief. Now, again, that's not going to solve problems, but we did address that, and they will be. We dealt with that this year with a kind of go out the same way with property tax refunds. That'll go also out to farmers this year, because we wanted to try to get that going this year, and then next year it's the permanent program. So this year is about $17 million, and then in the future about $15 million. One other area for counties, and you're not that impacted by that, is the dollars we provided for aquatic invasive species. Clay County gets about $8,000 this year, and about $18,000 you'll max out next year. In perspective, Becker County gets about $150 this year and $300 in the future, and Otter Tail gets about $220,000 and $440 in the future. And it's based on your number of boat ramps and parking spots there. So it's not great, but for counties like Becker County and where you're hearing about, Lake Melissa, just zebra mussels and Otter Tail, they're getting substantial amounts, and they're meeting. Their lake associations are meeting and then kind of giving recommendations to the county. And I know that's different here in Clay, but
yeah, we're actually going to be talking about that a little.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah, John put on an agenda addition for that purpose, so we're going to be talking about that.
So that's something that was new this year, but generally it was kind of a focus on bread and butter issues. The last couple of years, some pretty good amounts into education and higher education, and into care for seniors and those with disabilities. The one area, and I'll end with this, that we really need to do more work on is on transportation. We really didn't. There's a real transportation funding need. And quite frankly, while I support it, I don't know how to do it. You can raise the gas tax again, but that raises about $32 million per every 1 cent that you increase it. And, so if you raise it a nickel, that'd be about $160 million when you've got about $1 billion of needs. And then with cars and vehicles being more efficient, you're actually getting less per, you're kind of losing the base on that as people. So we may have to look at, the last year we gave a little more, I guess, responsibility to counties with the wheelage tax, which you enacted, and then there's a half-cent sales tax, which I think Becker County enacted. So there's different ways, but yet even that doesn't bring in the amount. So that is one issue, really, as we come back in the future. But again, thanks for what you do on, what we do is, we kind of set things up, and where it really happens is on the local level, where you provide the services. So thank you for that.
Paul, when years ago, when the proposal was out there to have a gas tax increase, and this was before you were on, but I served as one of 17 commissioners that was statewide that was researching this, and it was ultimately, it wasn't more so about supporting revenue, it was how are we going to distribute the revenue, which both of you are well know of, is that because there got to be this real argument how much of it goes to metro and how much goes to rural, and we wanted to protect our rural formula, and so that went on, and that was a number of years ago, but I think ultimately, we had big counties and small counties there, and we finally all realized that, what, if we don't do anything here, our roads are going to be worthless to us, and so are our bridges, and they're not going to be safe. And so we did manage to agree to a different formula for, and after that happened, then of course, then the legislature, knowing that there was an agreement between the metros and the counties, there was some action taken where did help bring in some revenue to all counties, which, and you guys were very involved and supportive of that as well, so. Thank you. Yeah. Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. And just kind of talking a little bit about transportation here. CNBC, they always put out this study of top states to do business every year. And for 2014, Minnesota actually jumped a couple spots. We're now the 6th best state in the country to do business. And one big reason for that they constantly point to is the infrastructure and the system of infrastructure in Minnesota. So looking forward to next year with transportation being a big issue, I think everybody around the state recognizes the importance of that in order for the state to stay competitive with other states in the country. But I think Senator Eakin and Representative Marquardt laid it out pretty well. Where we're at right now is a very strong position as a state, running a $1.2 billion surplus, paying back all the money that was previously borrowed to K-12 schools, or I should say E-12 with early childhood now, putting a lot of resources and some new methods of accountability for the schools. I know Moorhead here, for example, got $3.87 million in new dollars. They're taking the initiative on the all-day kindergarten here a year earlier than other schools in the state. So that was certainly something I was very pleased to see. Also, talking a little bit about property taxes, the House Nonpartisan Research estimates that property taxes are actually going to go down for 2014 by $83 million. And along with that, the Department of Revenue has estimated that the state local tax burden across Minnesota will actually decrease by 1.7%. So when you talk a lot about the property tax relief we provided through the homestead refund, the renter's credit, the CPA, the LGA, some things we did for local governments on the sales tax exemptions too, we're starting to see the results of that. And middle-class folks, they're starting to see the results of that too. So I think that's progress that I'm really looking forward to continuing on with, specifically with property taxes. But also just taking a look, I also saw a recent study by the Commonwealth Foundation, which ranked Minnesota as first in the country in terms of overall system of healthcare delivery and things. So there are a lot of things right now going on in this state that I feel proud to be a part of, and I think we should all be proud to be a part of. And when you take a look, too, I've been hearing folks talk about the frustration at the federal level, all the fighting and lack of progress done there. I think that's something else we as Minnesotans can really be proud of, the fact that the last 2 years our government has been moving forward and really producing progress for the state. So I think looking at next year with transportation, I think if we can really do some big things there, that'll be continuing in that same line of progress.
Good. All right. Questions from the board? John?
I guess, I think you've all indicated that transportation will be an important thing next year. What other issues are you seeing as to being big issues for the coming session?
I think looking forward, I think it's ensuring that everybody in the state, all families have that opportunity if they're willing to put in that hard work to really enjoy some of the progress and some of the success Minnesota's seeing right now. Just personally, I think education will continue to be a part of that. More options for early childhood, not just to close that achievement gap, address some of the issues that might come up early on in kids' lives, but also then give folks more opportunity to get out and enter the workforce. And on the other spectrum of that, with education, I think higher education will be a big part too. Of course, with the tuition freeze, getting a handle on that the last 2 years, but also taking a look and seeing if there are some things we can do to help out with students who have existing debt and being able to address some of those concerns.
Thank you.
And I would say, I know we got a 5% increase for nursing homes and the waiver services, but much more needs to be done there. They've fallen so far behind as far as the reimbursements and the compensation that they receive for that work. And the needs are growing, and they're growing fast. As the baby boom generation are fast approaching the years when they're going to need many of these long-term care services. We're going to have to prepare for that. So I think that we need to continue to focus the spotlight on that issue. I know a lot of people don't like to think about it because it's not very pleasant to think about all the work that needs to be done in order to address this growing demand. But if we don't start dealing with it now, it's going to be much more difficult later. And there's an age wave coming, and if we don't get out in front of it, it's going to swamp us, and it's going to threaten resources that could be used for many other things, education, infrastructure, and so on. That's one of the things I'm going to continue to focus efforts on. I think that we need to have a dedicated source of revenue just for long-term care. I think it's that big of an issue that we need to seek out a dedicated source. And I think people would support maybe raising money through a dedicated source if they know that it's going to take care of their grandparents or their parents, going to take care of those with disabilities.
I think very quickly 3 areas, and one would be the agricultural property taxes. I think there has to be more work on that. Number 2 would, in the last 10 years, the disparity between the high revenue school districts and the low revenue districts had increased by 67%, and most of that's between rural and the metro. In the last 2 years, we put some things in place that actually cut that disparity by about 30%, brought it closer together. There's a few things we can do as far as it's getting into the weeds a little bit, like on facilities funding for schools that can even really decrease that disparity even more. And I thought I had forgot that. I had not slept at the Holiday Inn last night, so I almost forgot that last one I was going to mention. But the third one is the redesign, and I see that on the wall over there, and I know Commissioner Everett was really involved with that. But just statewide, even some things we did in education this last year, something called the World's Best Workforce, is really a focus on results, on the public dollars that come in. What are folks getting as far as actually measurable results, whether or not student achievement? And I know, and I commend Clay County, I know you've been involved with that. I don't know what that is called, the performance measurements. I know you know.
Yeah, that we're partaking in.
Okay, yes, and so I commend you on that. I mean, that's the way that these, what does public dollars mean as far as safety, as far as educational achievement, all those things, and that's, we need to continue to move in that direction.
Okay. Well, I got a question for you, and it goes to my home area, and obviously it's going to be to something that I had worked on since 1997 as a township supervisor. Paul remembers it well, and that happens to be getting final work done on our Oakport project up there. And I understand that, this year that didn't work out, that $5-point-some million that's needed to finish this. What's happening right now is the areas that were done are certified now, and what we're seeing as a result of that is many properties are no longer having to send money out to flood insurance, significantly high dollar amounts, some in the areas of $2,000 to $3,000 annually. That leaves our economy here. And besides that, it's a burden to those homeowners to have to pay that. We're so close on this whole project, and I certainly would encourage you, and I know, Ben, you've been working pretty hard on it. And if we need to even start thinking out of the box on this, part of the final solution to fixing that is the road raise on County 1. That's basically what we got going on here. And I don't know if we could enter into some sort of conversations about a joint portion that could come out of bonding and some out of highway, because when I talked to Dave, that county road would be scheduled, somewhere, I think the term here 2 years ago was maybe 10 years down the road anyway. So, so we might, I would suggest that if we can't get it all in the bonding bill, if it's more difficult to get it all in the bonding bill, that we should look at a combination of avenues. And of course, come January 1, that area is going to be in the city, and the city is going to be really supportive and probably want to see that done as well. So, but I thank you for your, Paul. I know you've been a strong supporter in that all along since we started that. We were all disappointed when we had applied for the 204, Corps 204 plan, and they came back saying that we didn't meet their their cost-benefit ratio for a project from a federal standpoint. And that's when we went and testified before the state with Paul's help and Keith Langseth, of course. We managed to get an awful lot done, and our citizens are really anxious to see that finished, and I hope you can help with that. That's all I have. Frank, did you have anything? Hey, Brian.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think...
I was just going to add thanks for I know you all supported our efforts on the Heartland Trail project, too, to get some bonding money finally. So, and like I had been saying, we thought we had been patient waiting 40-some years for some financial assistance from the state, because it is a state trail. But I know you all supported it, and we nearly got $3 million to, deal with our efforts here to get the trail ready, and then Becker County, our neighbors, to actually get some trail down there in their section. So thanks for that, and I'm sure we'll be back for more in the future, but thank you.
So I know we were running a little bit behind, but we have a lot of staff here. I wonder, would you have time to answer any questions if we have some staff people who might want to... any of our... Brian?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, another thank you to these three. We had put forward the appointment bill a couple of years ago of appointing our auditor, treasurer, and our recorder, and it might seem something that was just small, but it was huge. It was to change how our elected officials serve, and we think it's a real huge endeavor. In fact, Representative Markert came along with it, and I know that kind of went against his philosophy for a lot of years, and we really support that kind of, and the Senator, you can support it in the Senate, and then Representative Lean just really kept me informed, and it was a timing this year. It only had to go through one stage of the House, but it had to be done rapidly in order to make the deadlines for this year's election, and you accomplished that. And again, it might seem small. It's not a big popular issue out there, but it really meant a lot to us, and thank you for that. And then just a couple information things. We have, our county board has entered into or has passed a resolution to enter into agreement with the burner over at PERM to burn solid waste, and we will be 15% owner in that, and it's going to require some transfer stations, update for Moorhead and things, and I know the state has been very supportive. You were supportive of Becker County this year in some monies to help along with that project, and we're going to be coming to you for some assistance on that in the future as well. We think it's really good for the region to be part of that burner and to do some different things with our solid waste. We have to look 50, 100 years from now how we're going to handle it. We just can't keep burying garbage, and so we'll be talking with you about that. Just want to give you a heads up that we'll be asking for some state support on that. And then the other thing, just for information's sake, we're in need of a new county jail. We know, or we assume there's no state dollars available for that, but there may be some other ways that we will be communicating with you in assistance there. So we need to push forward on that. We're housing about 20 prisoners out a day, and it's DOC that sets the standards for that. So if we can communicate with that and push forward on that, we'll be coming to you folks for that as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have just probably a few more minutes, but we have several staff people back there. Do any of you have questions for our legislatures? Or are we just all here to listen today? All right, Dave, first, why don't you go over to the microphone?
First time they've been quiet.
Yeah. They normally have a lot to say.
I guess I don't have, I'm Dave Overbo, the county engineer. I don't have quite so much a question as there's just kind of a comment on transportation funding. I know you talked about it a lot. It sounds real positive. But one area that we kind of got hit a little bit with this year is the bridge bonding, the amount of money, funds that went into bridge bonding this year. Statewide, there's probably 200 projects on kind of a waiting list. And MnDOT does a really good job of prioritizing in that, but we've probably got half a dozen or more bridge replacements. These are the little wood bridges that we've got around the county. We've got a lot of township, the township funding works pretty well. In fact, this is the first year in the last 13 years since I've been here that we actually spent all our town bridge monies, and then there's about $5 million of unencumbered money that we actually tapped into. So we actually spent additional funding that's available to county. So township side we're pretty good on, but the regular bridge bonding would be nice to see a little more in there. I think over half of what was allocated went for a special project down in the cities, which I understand they need, but we also got needs out here. And it seemed like when I first started working for the county, there was like about a $40 million kind of a set target, and I think it's kind of wavered back and forth since then. But it would be nice to see additional funds in that bridge bond program, because we can certainly spend it. There's not a lot of right-of-way, there's not a lot of environmental issues, so the projects are pretty streamlined. So I just want to kind of give a little push for that if I could.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody else? All right, I think, yeah, John.
I think we can't go without talking about the diversion, I think, as well. And, of course, Paul made the news last week when he expressed himself and his concern for funding from the state. Is there, how do you see the future of this project? I know, Paul, you feel it's funding from the state's in jeopardy because of the actions of the Diversion Authority. Any further comment on that? Or?
Well, I don't know if there's anything new to add. I think Mark Anderson referred to it a little bit when he talked on the Buffalo Red River Watershed Board applications, is that, this is a huge, huge project. And, I mean, when you get to certain points, I mean, process is really, really important. And you've got the federal government, you have 2 states, you've got a lot of local entities involved. I think it's imperative that they work together. And granted, certain states can do certain things and the other one can't stop it. But I think it's really important, just even with relationships and everything else, that everything is followed. And the Minnesota DNR was very clear in a January letter of this year in asking the Diversion Authority to wait on doing anything as far as projects, including the Oxbow, Hicks, and Bakke ring dikes, until they had this environmental impact statement done. And the reason the state has to do that, and it's required by law in Minnesota, is because of the high hazard dam that's going to be built on the Red River, and then also because of the staging area. And Minnesota needs to look at, how is this going to impact our side of the Red River on all of these things. And so that was very clear. The Diversion Authority feels that these ring dikes are not part of the project. Kind of, they call it an individual or independent utility, which means that whether or not it goes forward or not, it doesn't hinge on the project, whether or not things, both. They could benefit from both, but it's kind of independent. And I'm not going to go into the reasons, but the Minnesota DNR has looked at that very closely in all the statements, and they disagree with that. They feel it is very much a part of the project. And so I just think, as a legislator, and even the DNR, we can't stop what's happening on the North Dakota side because it's entirely over in North Dakota. But the one area where, as a legislator, I have some control is ultimately the funding. And something, whatever that would be, 5 or 10%, 100 million, 200 million, we don't know what that is, but whatever it would be, would come through a bonding bill. And if you have a local legislator for a local project saying, I'm against this local project, I've never seen it ever pass, because they can go, the legislature, they're looking for, you could have $1 billion bonding bill, it's probably $4 billion of requests. So there's all sorts of other areas to spend that money. They're not going to fight a local legislator who doesn't want a project, and So I thought it was important that the authority know that, and I mean, there's big concerns still on the upstream area, and Commissioner Campbell is well aware of all this. I mean, he's been he's been a big part of this, as all of you. But so I mean that's where I'm at. I just think that it's bad form, let's put it that way, to move ahead when in fact Minnesota will be done by spring of 2015. Now, I've met with the Oxbow mayor, and I said, I would do the same that you're doing. I would want protection, and as much protection as soon as possible. So I said, I have no concern with what you want to do, but the Diversion Authority has to look at this as an overall project with the state of Minnesota very involved. And I think moving ahead is not the right thing to do. until Minnesota looks at, what is going to be the impact of these things on its residents in the area.
Thank you.
So I don't know if there's anything to add on that,
No,
but I mean, that's
appreciate
kind
that.
of...
Thank you.
Again? And I agree with Paul, my concerns, and I've expressed those concerns with the DNR and the governor's office as well, that any unilateral action being taken is not good form, as Representative Marquardt said, at this point until after all the information is in. And the Minnesota DNR is in the middle of their process of the environmental impact statement. I think just a little patience goes a long ways towards developing a positive relationship, which I think is critical in pursuing any flood mitigation projects that's going to be comprehensive and as big as this. As far as the diversion itself, we're still waiting to get the information back as far as what the actual impact is going to be on the Minnesota side of the river. That's going to determine in large part what kind of support there is. It's going to determine in large part what the amount might be, if any, that's going to be that's going to be dedicated towards a diversion. But I think right now what we've been doing is focusing on just finishing up the flood mitigation projects we have already on the plate. And as you said, we're still pursuing funding for Oakport and for other flood mitigation projects. So we're going to finish up with Moorhead, but there's still work to be done. So we're focusing our efforts on that. The issue of funding for diversion and support for diversion will have to be addressed once all the information is in. And the DNR is still in the middle of their EIS. So we're waiting to hear back, and it's not going to be much longer. We were saying in the spring here of this next year, we should have the information in, and then we can start addressing that issue.
Good.
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot more to add other than, from my own personal perspective, I'm focusing on the work we still have to do here in District 4, or District 4A, my district, which is the Oakport project. And just kind of taking a look at this last year, the governor comes in at his proposal for flood mitigation dollars was zero. The fact that we were able to finish the Moorhead project, kind of going into it at that, I think that was quite a good feat for us here in Moorhead, that we could finish that. And so, just taking a look forward, there are still other projects that need to be completed, and we're still going to have to keep fighting for the Oakport project. And I'm starting to wonder too now with some of this flooding that's been going on around the state over the last month or so, if we're not going to see even more competition for those flood mitigation dollars. So that's where my efforts are really focusing on until we know more information from the DNR in terms of their permitting, whether they're going to permit the high hazard dam, and then from there how much benefit Minnesota would pay to the project. We have certainly work still on our plates right now to address right here in the district. So that's where my priorities are at.
Thank you.
And I think both the Moorhead City Council and the County Commission, as we've been involved, Moorhead being a sponsor and Clay County being a partner within the Diversion Authority, one of the messages that we've sent all along to them was that there will be no money coming from the City of Moorhead or Clay County to fund this construction project, that any money that comes from the Minnesota side would have to come from the state of Minnesota. You've all heard that, and I think that's been common agreement amongst all of our local entities here. So when Paul threw the shot across the bow, I think it was heard by them, and there's some concern there, because as we've said all along, and as I've told them as sitting on that authority board, is that if they want to have a partner from Minnesota in this, that's going to fund it, it's going to come from the capital. It's not going to come from the City of Moorhead taxpayers or Clay County taxpayers. Now, we have put in small amounts of money over the last few years to fund some studying that goes on, to a very, very small amount of dollars from our side. But so I don't know what will happen if there's jeopardy of funding. and North Dakota's got a lot of money, but I don't know where that's going to go. And you know, that got to be, you know, it kind of got to be the state of North Dakota giving their approvals to move forward with the project. That's my understanding of it, as well as the Cass County government. So,
Commissioner
Yeah.
Campbell, I really appreciate those comments, and I think one other area is, you know, according to the authorization from the federal government, and was premised on this chief engineer of the Corps report that said that all the local sponsors explicitly said they had to have all the environmental reviews done and all the necessary permits before beginning construction. So I think the project needs approval of this Minnesota permit, which would come out of the EIS. And I think that's another important area, and I think another reason the authority should really have thought twice about moving ahead with that. Moving ahead now, I mean, we don't get involved with the permitting process, you know, that's the DNR looking at that. But again, it does come down to trying to work as a partner, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I don't think there should be any legislative involvement on is the permit right to do or not. That should be up to the folks who are the experts at the DNR to do that. You know, and so. But you know, I think where your discussion is more, and the frustration is, you know, you've kind of made it difficult for the DNR, and I, as a legislature, when it does come to the purse strings, have something to say about it, and I you know, I think you're protecting your side of the river for that purpose, you know, But you know, in terms of long-term funding for the thing, you know, that's got to go to St. Paul, and there's also the language in there about there needing to be a project partnership agreement, and that project partnership agreement can't just be between the Corps of Engineers and the state of North Dakota. As far as I know, there has to be a third signature on there from Minnesota, and you know, so that's something we'll have to see how all that plays out, and that would come after the EIS is done. So, anybody else? Well, thank you for taking the time to come and see us today.
Thanks for your work.
Thanks for your service. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we need to take a break here. We're behind. All right, Brian, why don't you come up? Lori, you want to... I'm assuming you're here to...
Yes, yes.
Explain this. So this is initial budget information, huh?
You know, there's kind of a cartoon where, you know, they're giving someone a bat that doesn't want it. I was going to say dog, because that's what the picture is. I didn't want to reframe that. But this person is being drug into to give them a bath, and they've got all four limbs out hanging onto the doorway as they go through. It's kind of fun is to drag Lori in here.
You got to find your chair here. I feel like I'm...
Anyway, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission.
Good morning. Good morning, Lori.
Morning.
It's awfully, well, it's early. I wouldn't say it's awfully early. It's, gosh, only the middle of July of 2014, and we're trying to talk about a budget that doesn't go into effect for a year. So hopefully you'll bear with us on it. We wanted to keep you guys as informed as we possibly can as we go into this budgeting cycle, and let you know what we're doing and where it's at, and certainly allow you every opportunity to give us some guidance as to where you want to go on this, because it's your budget that you will approve and things. So what you have a little bit of information in front of you, and we thought we'd just run through a couple of the things that have occurred so far. All agencies have submitted their budget worksheets to Lori, and Lori's in the process of combining the information, and then we start going through it. We've gone through some, and of course you find out where revenue is left out here, and maybe expenses are left out there, and that's the whole process of going through it as many times as we do. So this is in an initial stage. We don't have any figures for you today on it because they're just too preliminary.
In fact, yesterday we talked, and even talked a little bit this morning about some adjustments we're already making to some of those things. So it's really early, but just to run through these things just a little bit, the accompanying documentation is something for you, just for your edification. But page 2 on there is your estimated market value growth. As you see, that it was a 1.4% new growth of construction, and that's a favorable number. I think last year was 1%, so it's certainly increasing. You can see the valuation of your properties have gone up by $87 million. And that's a positive thing as well. But the new construction was really favorable, we felt. You're still looking at over $5 billion, about $6 billion in value in Clay County, which is pretty impressive. Your page 3, you've seen this before, and I printed it out last week in comparisons, and so I just thought I'd furnish it to you since I have the information. You'll probably see it later on. We'll talk about it more. And what it is, it's Clay County in comparison to the other parts of the state. And this is information, I can't say that it's absolutely 100% accurate in every category. It's taken off the state auditor's site, so it should be as relative as it can be. But again, there's always information that's either left out or not. But I think the interesting fact on that is if you're going back to the year 2012 here, because that's the most recent information they have. If you compare 2012 up on top to 2011, you'll see that per capita, again, we moved down 4 spots, or up 4 spots, whatever you want to. We're 79 out of 87 as far as tax per capita. We were 75 out of 87 in 2011. I kind of wonder if 2012, though, wasn't that year that you guys reduced your levy by 3.71%. So that makes quite a jump in 1 year to move 4 slots. And it's you can go on that site and compare the other counties and things, but I know last year we had some discussion at our TNT about this. So just for your information, I guess. And then
Brian, can you explain exactly what that means? 49th of 87?
Or 79.
79, I mean, yeah.
Well, what that is, you'll see that per capita, your tax levy is $388.95 in 2012. That ranked us, if number 1 was the highest ranking, in other words, we taxed each citizen $1,200 per capita, that you would be number 1 out of 87. Well, we're 79 out of 87.
We're one of the lowest taxes.
That's what I want to make clear. We're
one of the lowest taxes.
Per capita.
But you could read it the other way.
Yes, you could. Yes, you could. And very thank you for bringing that up, because there are counties that are up in the thousands per capita on that list. So you're down, and you move four positions from 2011 to in the positive. In the positive. So I think that's a good sign, as long as we're offering a good quality service, which we think we are. Then your next page is your the one with the red headings up there. That was the fund balance comparisons. You received that fairly early this year, and it was for the end of the year of 2013. There's been some minor adjustments to it, so if you say, gee, you're off $400 or $3,000 from one fund to the other, comparing it to your next sheet, this is very, very close. It's very solid, but it's maybe not exactly the dollar on there. But it gives you a real good idea of where your fund balances are in the different categories. There was some social services, if you remember right, there was a late payment that was coming in when we talked about these earlier, so that's in pretty good shape too. It's probably around that $8 million.
So that payment isn't in there yet?
It's not in this sheet.
Not in this sheet.
This was the one I gave you quite early on. But like I said, I had the information available and just thought I would supply it to you today. And then the last one on there is, this also has the fund balances down towards the bottom, and it was the information you'd asked for, and this came maybe a couple months ago. On May 2nd is when this was printed out. And you wanted to see the revenues versus the expenditures for the single year. And then down on the bottom, about the 5th line up of figures, it says fund balance December 31st.
Now, as you go across and you compare what category that is in, that'll compare fairly close to the one that I've given you in red. So they're coming out pretty close, but I'll just look at social services. Social services is 7.410 on this one, and on the red one, it was 7.425, so it was $15,000 difference. That's just an example. There might be a slight verification or a variance from that. So anyway, those probably are something you just want to take a look at for your own information as we go through this process. So if we want to go back to the memo that we put together, we have had in the initial requests about $319,951 in new requests, and they include a new position in technology services or information or technology. IT is what more common terminology. We call it technology services. And Tim Dent is asking for one additional FTE there, plus about $20,000 increase in his internal services. He feels that that does slide behind. County attorney is going to be asking for one additional FTE, and that is an attorney. It's not a support staff. It is an attorney. And then about $12,000 in capital purchase. I think that is a copier. Mark Sloan, Information Services, is asking for $45,000 in new programming, and we'll certainly work through what those needs are. The Assessor's Office is looking for some new programming on some programs as well, about $20,000 worth. Human Resource, about $15,000 in some new programming. We talked a little bit about that this morning in our PIC meeting. Planning is asking for a new program of $25,000, but that's for an update and comprehensive plan. You realize that we have to do that comprehensive plan. I believe MetroCog is willing to share half of that. It's about a $100,000 figure, I think, and we suggested spreading it over a couple of years, but we'll get into more of that later too. But that's for the comprehensive plan. Maintenance needs some new equipment of $23,000 they're asking for. Emergency management, $2,000 for new programming. And last year, you had a presentation or in the law enforcement budget that the Red River Dispatch needed 6 new people to add 1 more council. And the Dispatch Center's governing board decided on 3 last year and 3 this year. So the 3 are coming in this year on your budget. And you are 10% of that for Clay County, remember. So it would be like 0.3 of a person that they're asking for our rate on that, but I thought you should be aware of that. I didn't have that on there because, like I said, this is just being added as we talk. Remember that the jail committee had agreed that they would ask the county board for an additional $50,000 added each year for the jail construction plan. So that will be a new request because it is in addition to the $50,000 that was put in there last year. And then the recorder's office, I've talked about a couple of full-time positions being added. The recorder's office is not requesting to fill the position that was vacated when the recorder vacated, so that will be a gain of 1 FTE there. So of all the FTEs that you see on there, 2 are being asked for, and 1 is being not funded, so a reduction of 1. So at least right now, it appears like there's a net increase of requests for 1 additional FTE. In a county our size, that's pretty conservative. There will be some additional, probably monies asked for some variable hours and things, but and then just some other items in the regular budget, just so you're aware. The state legislature passed an increase for the para, for the employee and the county and the cities to contribute another 0.25% to para. That'll be probably around $75,000 somewhere.
And that's mandatory,
area.
right? Yep.
And that's mandatory. We are going to be figuring into the budget a 2% cost of living adjustment for your consideration. We do have some contracts, some labor contracts that do have that contained. We were pretty close on the $200,000 increase in premium on the insurance last year. I think it ended up at $222,000 or something like that. But so we're using that figure again this year when we push into it. County program aid will be pretty flat. I think that's going to be pretty close to what it was last year of $2.891 million. So that's what we're going forward until we find out the exact amount. And the MCIT dividend, I've gotten some feedback. It'll be down about a third this year. We haven't got our exact amounts, but it'll be maybe around that $200,000, just slightly more than $200,000 on the dividend back. So wheelage tax is included in the budget as revenue and as an expense. Remember, that is not a levy item to it, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. No net effect on the levy. Rebate dollars for housing starts will be requested in the levy and rebated back to the property owner. You understand how that works as well. The levy gets spread over the taxpayers, but we do rebate the amount of that tax back to the taxpayer. The taxpayer pays it in, and then we rebate it back. But the levy is spread over all of the taxpayers. So, discussion, and then the item, I guess, we are starting to formulate who you want to see. It'll be, I'm sure, all of the ones that have new requests, the ones that have big budgets, bigger budgets. So just some direction from you as to, I imagine you'd like to go forward with, I know you want the budget first of all, and we'll get that to you probably next week. Maybe we can get that together, and then we'll start moving with presentations, and you'll get an idea of where we're at.
Well, you know, my thought on it, Brian and Lori, would be obviously anybody who's having new requests, we need to have them come and talk to us. And just because they don't have new requests doesn't mean that they might still be having a significant increase in their department. And I think anybody who is looking at that needs to come before us and explain why it is that they want this increase. And for that matter, I don't think we should close the door to any department head for whatever reason. If they want to just come and share with us what their budget is, even if they don't have an increase or whatever, and they want to share that with us, I think we should allow them the opportunity to come. I just think we need to be open with them to say, well, we're not only going to see this department and that department. We'll talk to anybody who wants to come before us and share their budget with us.
Okay.
I've got a question on these that you've got listed. Now, I had a meeting with Soil and Water Conservation District, and they said they submitted their budget June 25th, which I got a copy of their letter.
Yep.
Have we got that? Or?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay. I mean, they just wanted to share. Yeah, I guess they'll probably come forward. They did want to share a few things, I guess.
Yeah.
They were appreciative of what we've done so far. I mean, but
And I don't think this includes any external agencies yet, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
But we've always had, well, let me qualify that. This doesn't include any external agencies, but they are included in the budget when we get you the budget numbers.
Right.
And yes, we've always had Soil and Water come in and present.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think the external agencies, if they're requesting increases, we need to have an explanation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. All right. John?
Yeah, I think I appreciate what you put together here. I think it looks pretty good for this time of year. Sometimes we start off a lot further off than now, and hopefully we can work out to get their staff what they need and to do a more efficient job. So.
One question, Mr. Chair. What we have done in the past is we have compiled, the departments all send us their goals for the next year, and then Vicki has been copying those, and we include that in the memo. Do you want that paperwork with it so that you can refer back to the goals on it?
I would certainly think so,
okay.
Yeah.
We've done that, and we'll be compiling. I just didn't know if you wanted to have that paperwork given to you, so we will do that again.
So now that we, this is kind of the first blush at this, and we've got till September 15th for a preliminary levy, so time flies,
Yes, it does.
And so we need to, maybe Brian, you can start coming to us within the next meeting or so with proposed time frame to who we're meeting with when, and
Absolutely.
So that can all, you got to work backwards from, and I think if I'm not mistaken, we always like to try to get it the Tuesday earlier than the 15th.
15th is on a Monday this year, so we would have to make our final decision by the 9th.
Right.
And then we want to make sure, too, that we have a full quorum here on the 9th to deal with that.
Hopefully.
So.
Well, you guys would never go 2-2 on a vote, would you?
Never.
And I should have the full budget to Brian today.
Right.
I've been through it a number of times, and I think we have everything pretty much nailed down, so.
Good. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll move on. I think at this time John, let's take your agenda addition on the
Okay.
aquatic species.
Lori, you might be of interest on this, too. I was at the Basin Commission yesterday for a meeting, and there's a new staff person there who's assigned to working with the invasive species prevention aid, and I asked, he said that, he informed me that Clay County had, for 2014, was allocated $8,151 for education or whatever to try to prevent invasive species introduction to the county. At this point, we have no lakes or streams that are indicated to be affected, but we certainly couldn't be because they're very close. I mean, Becker County has a number of lakes now that are affected. And the amount for 2015 is $18,114. And so it's already allocated out of, the legislature allocated out of the legacy funds, but we do have to apply for it, and we have to pass a resolution asking for the money. But in order to do that, we have to put together some kind of a plan as to how we're going to spend that money. And it seems to me that it's definitely something, we don't get a lot of money, but we better make sure we use that to try to do what we can to prevent introduction of the invasive species.
Yeah, I agree, John. We do have a few small lakes within our county that people seem to frequent too. With, and they're oftentimes you can't do an awful lot, but you see on a lot of the major lakes, at least they have signage up and all that kind of things, trying to instruct them on what to do, in terms of removing boats and stuff like that.
The staff member that's assigned with the Basin Commission would be willing to come to our board meeting to explain and talk to us about it, but I suggested maybe we wanted to wait until September or something after our budget stuff is done.
Well, how long do we have to apply for this?
We have till the end of December.
Okay.
To apply, so maybe we can, he can come anytime, but...
Grant?
I was just going to say, we don't have a lot of lakes, but we do have a lot of people with boats, and they're pulling those boats to lakes all over our region, so I think it's important for us to do our part and make sure people are educated about what a serious issue this is for the state of Minnesota.
And you'd be surprised how many boats go into the Red River.
Absolutely.
There's an awful lot of them, so I think we have some. I think it would be really good for us to hear from this person. And then ultimately, who would we have within the county to...
well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Who would be the...
oversee this, and you got to have somebody with some knowledge in it, too,
Well, Mr. Chair, some thought on that, and we have had one contact from Becker County. They wanted to kind of set up a joint task force, and like you heard this morning, of course, their dollars are a lot more. So it was a small amount. We've had very little conversation with it in the county level, but we knew it was a small amount. And frankly, we heard very good news this morning from Commissioner Everett just said, if the basin is willing to have some kind of an educational program, maybe that's where the money goes. We just pass it through to them, because $8,000 doesn't allow you much to set up.
No, you can't hire a staff person for it. You could pay for some sessions.
So that's kind of what we were hoping for, is maybe some joint program.
And John, I don't, even though we have the budget going on, I don't know why we couldn't spend a 15-minute segment in a meeting to have them come sooner than that. Anything, and the fact of the matter is this is the season, and boats are being moved, and the fact that we would be having this discussion here where people can watch will also can be an education process for them too. That
very good.
Always needs to go on. So I would.
I'll give this to Brian.
Yeah, give that to Brian, and you have the contact name then.
Yeah.
All right. Good. All right. Very good. We'll move on to committee reports. Grant.
Let's see, I just had, I'll be on the Yellow Ribbon Committee meeting last week, and just talked, they've got a lot of positive things going to assist veterans in Clay County and in our area, and they continue to do good work with that organization. And then I attended the chamber event they had for business leaders and elected officials on the diversion, and thought that was good and informative, and it was well attended, and a lot of information given to everybody in attendance. So that was it for me.
John.
Yes, I also attended the chamber meeting last Wednesday concerning the diversion, and I too thought it was a very good meeting, and a lot of important concerns were expressed from different business people, and we often don't hear from the business community about what's needed, so I thought it was very good. There was a land management meeting for the diversion on the 10th, on Thursday, and there wasn't, I don't think, a lot of new stuff there. It's mostly reporting on the appraisal progress and stuff like that, but there probably was more action. There more important stuff discussed at the actual authority meeting, which you were at. So yesterday there was a meeting of the Basin Commission Communications Committee that's planning the conference for next January. It'll be in Winnipeg this time, and we think it's going to be a good conference dealing with solving the basin problems one goal at a time is the theme. Last week was the county fair, and I think it was an excellent fair. We did have, I think, 3 different departments that were out there on Thursday afternoon, and from the county. And hopefully they had a chance to talk to a few people. Thursday, of course, is a slower day usually than the other days, but that seems to be when the staff is available. So, but it was a good fair, good weather, and it's a great gathering place for a county. That's all.
Okay, Frank.
Started out last Thursday with a meeting out of Linden with Monsanto, where they're planning expansion, looking at close to a $6 million expansion out there. So they're looking at some tax abatements and tax increment financing, so we'll be hearing a little bit more there. Tim Magnuson is along out there with me, and they're going to be giving them the forms and stuff and advice on how to move ahead with that, So they're looking at increasing their part-time help and increasing some of their 3 full-time employees out there too, So they're just starting to get her set up out there, but they would like to start almost by September this year already, so they got to move along with their forms and stuff. After that, I went out to the Clay County Fair. In fact, I was out there Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, and John was out there handing out that ice cream there. I do want to compliment on that fair, when the 3 days that I was out there, a big presence out there is what Ben and his staff does. Yeah, I mean, the 4-H out there, when I was out there Thursday, that building was full of people, getting all this project set up and getting judged and stuff like that, and they were there every day, those 4-H guys, and that, they make a big presence out there at that fair, I think they really help it along, and Ben and his staff, they were out there every day working at it, so it was good. Then Thursday afternoon, later that day, I went to the FMCOG executive meeting. We had some personnel issues there they had to take care of. Next after that was the Soil and Water Conservation District, and we discussed, they were talking about budget. That's why I was asking what their budget was in there, and they appreciate the county support, but they did say, they've taken over the feedlot inspections, the ag inspections, the spraying, and noxious weeds and stuff. So they've taken over quite a bit of stuff for the county, So, they appreciate our support for the budget, for giving them money on that. Let's see. Then after that, Monday, last night, I went out to Morgan Township. They had the picnic, and I went out to Hagen Township. They had some. I don't know if you should still be aware of that fire that we had out there 2 years ago. They've where we got some letters on that. They explained it, and I think they settled that last night. So that's all been settled. So we should be okay with that now. And Then I went over to Cromwell Township and attended the rest of their meeting. And they're coming out under Cromwell's now, going to be under our county program as far as maintenance of the roads. They contracted out themselves for a while now. They're coming back to the county again, so they're waiting to see what's going to happen there again. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Okay, well, I too attended the meeting with the chamber, with the business leaders and the Home Builders Association, and all of those agencies there were basically there to lend support to the permanent flood protection plan known as the FM diversion. There was some good presentations by business owners, both from Fargo and Moorhead, who raised some really good issues in terms of why it's needed. After that, of course, then on Thursday we did have the diversion board itself, and the biggest issue, it was kind of a non-eventful meeting. There wasn't a lot going on other than the fact that they talked a little bit about the authorization. But one of the areas that they did talk about moving or going to the aqueduct demonstration. That's going to be on the 24th, I believe it is, of July. Do you have that?
It's next Thursday.
Yeah,
next Thursday.
And then there was discussion in the finance area regarding how North Dakota wants to handle trying to get money up front by working with a lending institution, and by doing that they would still have the full faith and backing by the county sales taxes that both Fargo and Cass have had, plus the dollars that have been committed from the state of Minnesota, or the state of North Dakota, not Minnesota. And so what they're trying to do is you've heard some talk on the North Dakota side about creating a special assessment district. And what the special assessment district does is it allows them to get funding at a reduced rate that then would allow, once everything is in place, they could actually expedite the construction of the project, thereby saving a lot of dollars, similar to the theory that we had when we did our bonding bill with our highways on that 5-year deal. And of course, the idea is that those special assessments would never be collected, because the bond payment would be covered by the sales tax dollars that come in from both Fargo and Cass and the state of North Dakota with the state's commitment. That's an issue that's totally on that side of the river, and it doesn't apply to us. And so but they spent quite a bit of time talking about that. Then this morning we had a personal issues committee meeting, and Darren will be coming before us next week. There's changes to the law regarding our sick leave. We have to modify our sick leave to add some different language for different family members, and a couple of other reasons that are in there. But we'll kind of wait, Darren, until you can make your presentation next Tuesday on that. But and then he did talk to us a little bit about the item that is on the budget sheet that was presented by Brian, and that has to do with some software that would improve their ability to handle workloads and hopefully have a little more efficiencies in there. So that's all I have. So Brian, we'll move to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One meeting that we held, I think it was right after a board meeting last Tuesday, was that we met in regards to the DMV traffic flow out there after the remodeling. Now we're trying to really refine how the movement of the people come in there. So we did meet on that, and Mark has all of the equipment has been ordered, and it's in, and hopefully will be installed very soon as he can coordinate with maintenance, because we're just going to do that in-house. It's a low voltage numbering system. It's electronic ones that's going to be put up there. So we'll look forward to hopefully that smoothing out and flowing better. I did spend a little time out there Friday afternoon to kind of observe the flow and see how we can make some improvements on that as well. I attended that chamber business flood meeting as well that's been talked about. Had a conference call that lasted for an hour and a half, reference the diversion. I attended the public affairs meeting at the chamber, and part of that was also from the feedback from the business meeting that was, the flood business meeting that was held. Also attended the land management, and Commissioner Everett already reported on that. Just one thing that they spent a little bit of time on was wanting to schedule a meeting with the person that's going to be researching insurance and flowage easement on flooded areas, and I think that's an important topic, and they're trying to balance out what would be most beneficial there and how it would balance out. If you insure the crop, does that affect then the flowage easement and the cost of that? And there was a little bit of discussion spent on that. Some personnel issues, again, we had, that took a little time, was an unemployment hearing with the state. It took an hour or so. And then I had a webinar on MNsure, and sat in on that for quite a while, where there's lots of things being done there, and where it's going to end up. I mean, they have a direction, but Rhonda will come in and give a presentation on that and update you guys on that. I think I'd sent that out too, that was available to sit in on. And the PIC meeting was covered well this morning, and then Lori and I have been, and some of the other departments. We've already communicated with several other departments for clarity on their budgets, and we'll continue to work on budgets pretty aggressively in the next few weeks and get those appointments set up and the presentations and things. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. Vicki, anything else?
No.
Any? All right, this meeting is adjourned, and then we will be back here at 5 p.m. tonight.